Ever since it was implied by Momoshiki that the Otsutsuki have meddled with the memories of humans even before the events of Boruto chapter 79, the Boruto fandom has been scrambling to figure out what exactly does this mean, and for good reason. This single statement by Momoshiki has dire consequences and pretty much gives Kishimoto the means by which he can retcon any aspect of the story. However, what I find more interesting are the crumbs being carefully laid out by Kishimoto, which will inevitably lead into the resurrection of Kaguya Otsutsuki. You see, this isn't something Kishimoto whipped up overnight. In fact, this was planned from the very inception of the story and also Boruto himself. As I've mentioned in prior videos, Boruto is very special in the sense that he's the bridge that combines Hagoromo's and Hamura's bloodline, thus manifesting Kaguya's true chakra. Trust me, what I'm about to say will explain why Boruto's horn looks the way it does and why he has the Jougan. For this to make sense, let's go back to when Kaguya first arrived on the planet. What we know is that the god tree was already planted, and it's implied by a side character that this has been there for over 1,000 years. Kaguya's mission along with Ishiki was to procure the chakra fruit and return it to the Otsutsuki clan, well, at least in Naruto's interpretation of events. In Boruto, it's implied by Amado that Kaguya was meant to be fed to the god tree to provide vitality for the fruit. Either way, the fruit itself should have been returned to the Otsutsuki clan. It's also said by Amado that Kaguya betrayed Ishiki and attacked him while he was off guard, which resulted in him shrinking and flying into the head of a nearby monk called Jougan. Kaguya then lived peacefully among the humans and was impregnated by an emperor called Tenji. But after she was betrayed by this emperor, she consumed the chakra fruit for herself, then used its power and her newly awakened Rena Sharingan to place the entire planet under the infinite Tsukunomi Genjutsu. She did this because she loved the planet and wanted to stop all the wars among the humans. However, she later released some of the humans from the infinite Tsukunomi because she didn't want all of them to die. She then later had two sons known as Hamura and Hagoromo, who after finding out about the remaining humans stuck within the infinite Tsukunomi, thus being killed and turned into white Zetsus, the two brothers confronted Kaguya. She then informed them that she must do this to protect the planet from invaders, later revealed to be Momoshiki, Kinshiki, and Urashiki. However, the two brothers didn't agree with her methods and tried to stop her. Their betrayal led to Kaguya, who was betrayed once before, launching an all-out attack on both brothers in an effort to regain the chakra she shared with them. The brothers in the end was able to seal Kaguya using 6 past Chubaku Tensei, and both went their separate ways. Hamura decided to guard Kaguya on the newly created moon, and Hagoromo remained on the planet to later share his chakra with the other humans in an effort to connect everyone through the concept of Ninshu. However, this chakra was later used by humans to wage war amongst each other and resulted in the formation of clans who shared similar bloodline traits as a result of that chakra. The most prominent of all being the Senju and Uchiha, who are direct descendants of Hagoromo's bloodline through his sons Ashura and Indra, while the Hyuga clan members are all descendants of Hamura, who went to the moon at the end of the battle with Kaguya. What this likely means is that some of Hamura's descendants descended from the moon and created the Hyuga bloodline on the planet. I say all of this to establish a chakra link between every human who has chakra and Kaguya herself. This of course leads us to Naruto and him being an Uzumaki, which makes him a descendant of Hagoromo since they are cousins of the Senju and share a similar bloodline. What this means is that Naruto at a deeper level possesses the chakra and the DNA of Hagoromo, along with being the reincarnation of his son Ashura, while Hinata, being of the Hyuga clan, possesses the chakra of Hamura, the brother of Hagoromo. And we also have to remember that not only does Naruto possess Hagoromo's chakra by way of being his descendant, he also got more of that chakra during the war when Hagoromo gave him half his power. This is all relevant since Naruto and Hinata are both the parents of Boruto and Himawari, which means that they both now share the chakra of Hinata and Naruto, thus now sharing the chakra of Hagoromo and Hamura. But what exactly does this mean? Well, if you go by the logic established in the series itself, in order to awaken the power of Hagoromo's chakra, one must combine the chakras of his two sons, Ashura and Indra. And because Hashirama and Madara were both the reincarnations of Indra and Ashura before Naruto and Sasuke, Madara was able to awaken Hagoromo's chakra, thus awakening the Rinnegan, by grafting Hashirama's cells into his own wounds. The precedent set here is that you can awaken the chakra of the parent by combining the chakra of their children. What this means is that Kaguya's chakra would awaken within Boruto and Himawari, since they both now possess the chakra of both her sons. What's interesting here is how that chakra chooses to manifest within Boruto and Himawari. With Boruto, I believe this is is why his horn looks the way it does in his partial Otsutsuki state, and it doesn't look the same as Momoshiki's. We can see that his horn protrudes directly from his face, then curves and points directly upwards, which then basically led all of the fandom to believe that Boruto received the cells of Shibai that affected him on a genetic level, and I'm one of those people. But what if the culprit was Kaguya's DNA instead, and by extension her chakra? You see, if we take a closer look at the design of Shibai's horn, while it does look similar to Boruto's from the front, it seems completely different from a side profile, and that's because Shibai's horn also goes around the side of his head when Boruto's horn doesn't. Now you could just say that it just didn't come out exactly the same, and that would be an okay argument. However, what if the real reason is a combination of Momoshiki, Kinshiki, and Kaguya, in that his horn protrudes directly from his face due to the influence of Kinshiki's cells that were in fact absorbed by Momoshiki, but the curve and pointy edge at the top was due to Kaguya's genetics and chakra that was then combined with Momoshiki's. Because again, what we know for a fact is that Boruto has the DNA and chakra of these three Otsutsukis that could lead to the outcome of the horn we see on Borushiki, so we really don't need Shibai to be of any influence on Boruto. This is further backed up by Momoshiki saying that Boruto strongly inherited the powers of the Otsutsuki, the keyword there being strongly. You see, we have this thing called recessive inheritance, which is when a genetic trait skips a generation but appears in another. In this type of inheritance pattern, a person must inherit 2 copies of a gene from each parent in order to express the trait. If a person only receives 1 copy of the gene from one parent, they become a carrier of the trait, but they don't show any symptoms of it. The trait in question may then skip a generation before appearing in an offspring of 2 carriers, who each possess a copy of the gene. A good example of this would be the Uzumaki, who are known for their red hair, but then you have Naruto, who doesn't possess this genetic trait, and that's because he only received 1 copy of the gene from his mother, since his father isn't an Uzumaki. Now this again would explain the power Himawari and Boruto will receive due to that genetic data coming together from Hagoromo and Hamura, but it really doesn't explain the Jougan, since for the Jougan to be a recessive inheritance, Kaguya would have needed to have the dojutsu in the first place, but she doesn't. The real reason Boruto has the Jougan is due to incomplete penetrance, which is a term used in genetics to describe a situation in which an individual inherits a genetic mutation that is known to cause a certain trait or disorder, but the individual does not express or exhibit the trait or disorder. In other words, the presence of the mutation does not always result in its manifestation. For example, if a genetic mutation is known to cause a particular autosomal dominant disorder and the penetrance of the mutation is incomplete, it means that not all individuals who inherit the mutation will develop the disorder. Let's say the incomplete penetrance of this mutation is estimated to be 80%. This means that 80% of the individuals who inherit the mutation will develop the disorder, while the remaining 20% will not. What if the penetrance level of the Jougan gene is less than 10%, which means that only less than 10% of the people who possess the gene will awaken the dojutsu? This would explain how Boruto can have the Jougan while Kaguya doesn't, even though his Otsutsuki gene came from Kaguya. What this means is that Kaguya is a descendant of someone who possessed the Jougan gene. And we know for a fact that the Jougan isn't a genetic mutation specific to Boruto, since both Borushiki and Momoshiki recognized the dojutsu, which again led to Momoshiki saying that Boruto strongly inherited the power of the Otsutsuki. Speaking of Momoshiki, I believe that he's fully aware of everything I just said. He knows that Boruto strongly inherited the powers of the Otsutsuki, as he himself stated. He knows that his power comes from Kaguya because just like how Sasuke can sense Momoshiki's presence within Boruto, Momoshiki can sense Kaguya's power within him as well. However, Kaguya's influence is of no benefit to Momoshiki while he doesn't have full control over Boruto's body. And since he wants Boruto to rely on his powers so that he has an opportunity to manifest himself, as we've seen him do on multiple occasions, Momoshiki has suppressed Kaguya's power, thus suppressing the dojutsu that comes via that power. Don't you guys find it suspicious how Boruto's Jougan has had lesser appearances since Momoshiki implanted his karma seal, especially in cases where he truly needed that power, the same power that allowed him to finesse fuse Momoshiki. Instead, we have Boruto relying more and more on Momoshiki's karma. This clearly wasn't something that happened for no reason. In fact, the anime went out of their way to show us Boruto using the Jougan on multiple occasions pre-getting Momoshiki's karma, to only 2 appearances since then. Not only that, in the manga, Damon was able to sense immense power within Himawari, power to the point where he thought she could easily dodge his attack. However, when it came to Boruto, he said there wasn't anything special about him and that he was weak. But why is that? Why can he sense that powerful chakra within Himawari but not in Boruto? Well, that's for the same reason Boruto's Jougan hasn't manifested in moments when he truly needed it. Momoshiki is suppressing that power, which is very similar to what Kurama did to Naruto, so that he would have to draw on his power more. This would in turn weaken the seal that kept Kurama trapped within Naruto. Now, how exactly does this relate to the return of Kaguya? Well, for one, it's the use of her power in the story itself, which I'm sure we're going to get more information on later on. Then we have her being directly mentioned by Momoshiki multiple times, and then we have her being Ishiki's partner, which injects her back into the plot again. And also what Momoshiki said in chapter 79 about the Otsutsuki manipulating the minds of humans back in the past. For those who have no idea, this is likely a direct reference to Kaguya erasing the minds of all the humans who were trapped within the infinite Tsukunomi. As I mentioned earlier, Kaguya released some of the humans who were trapped within the Genjutsu so that the human race wouldn't go extinct, but she also changed their memories of what happened so that they wouldn't rebel. Now, how does Momoshiki know this? I have no idea. Maybe they'll explain that later on, but I think this is what he's referring to. Of course, it could be something else, but that's the only reference I know of in the story itself. With that being said, how Kaguya comes back will likely be due to that connection she has with Boruto. It's more likely that Boruto will rein in Momoshiki eventually and fully tap into his Jougan as seen in the time skip. This might allow him to fully unlock Kaguya's chakra, which would then allow him to speak to her in a spiritual plane similar to what Naruto did with Hagoromo. Now, I know some people will be saying that Kaguya is stated to be dead in Momoshiki's databook, so she can't come back for any reason. However, we know that her soul isn't dead because she wasn't extinguished. She was just sealed using the same jutsu that sealed her in the past. Yet she was able to come back again in Naruto with the help of Black Zetsu, and even after being sealed again by Naruto and Sasuke, Black Zetsu himself said that he would just start again to have her resurrected again. This simply means that Kaguya can indeed be resurrected again. The only problem is that you'll need infinite Tsukunomi levels of chakra to feed into her body, thus providing her sustenance. But they could go a different route with Boruto freeing her from Chibaku Tensei using space-time ninjutsu as he did for Naruto when he was sealed by Jougan. The point is that it can be done since it has been done before. However, I don't see this happening until post-time skip when the gods descend upon the land as predicted by Toneri. So Kaguya could help them in the physical fight against the Otsutsuki as well as being a true source of information. And I believe that Kaguya would help them since Kaguya also despises the Otsutsuki and loves the planet more than anything else, so she would do anything to protect it. All in all, this is just a theory, so let me know your thoughts about it in the comment section. Now, the audio for this video might be a little wonky because I'm really sick at the moment and I try to really push myself to record it, so hopefully it turns out good. If not, you know, it is what it is. But let me know your thoughts about the theory itself in the comment section. Do you believe that Kaguya is the reason why Boruto has the Jougan? You know, do you believe that the genetic trait traveled through Kaguya, through her sons, then through her sons' descendants who are Ashura, Indra, and then the Senju and Uzumaki and all that jazz, which then leads to Boruto, and he finally awakened the gene or the genetic trait which Kaguya passed down to them. Do you think that's the case? And also, do you believe that Kaguya will return in Boruto? Do you think it's a possibility? Let me know your thoughts about it in the comment section down below. But with that being said, I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.